20. The Eschatology of Sin. Eschatology, the doctrine of last things, is normally an aspect of Christian theology, but humanism is not lacking in eschatological thinking. Humanistic eschatology sees a double possibility. First, the natural direction of the universe is to run down. There is a continuous diminution of energy and a cosmic decline which looks ahead to a final state of collapse. This doctrine of decay has been used by humanists to criticize as fallacious the biblical doctrine of the renewal of all things as the curse of sin is progressively lifted, and the culminating recreation of all things by Christ at his second coming. However, the humanists have not been without their own doctrine of renewal. This first alternative, cosmic decay, is seen by most humanists as more than a possibility. It is held to be a certainty, although some would question the second law of thermodynamics. Second, there is the possibility of a man-made, scientifically engineered renewal of all things. Kenneth Hewer, a British astronomer, is one such scientist who believes in this renewal. Man can arrest decay by constructing, someday, his own sun, an artificial sun, operating on subatomic energy. Given enough time, others hold, death itself can be overcome. This possibility of a new creation via humanism is usually held to be a potential attainable by means of a scientific statism. As a result, we have a religious establishment of this faith in science. To attain a humanistic control over the universe, tax funds go increasingly for various forms of research, from medical research to space exploration. The goals are envisioned in humanistic terms. Moreover, in more than a few areas, scientific research is followed with messianic expectations. When Paul Ehrlich announced the discovery of a cure for syphilis in 1911, the news was greeted with ecstatic joy. The possibility of sinning without serious or any consequences was seen by humanists as a landmark in history. In due time, all venereal diseases would be abolished, and a painful penalty would be removed. Later, the same happy expectation greeted the announcement of penicillin. Similarly, the development of the birth control pill was openly hailed by many as the death of sexual inhibition and as a major step in the liberation of women. It was believed that with the, quote, liberation, end quote, of sex from consequences, guilt's feelings would also in due time disappear, and men and women would enter into an earthly paradise, a humanistic garden of delights. It is important, therefore, to glance at what happens when sin has its way. Does it lead indeed to a garden of delight, to use the expression or idea of late medieval heretics? The evidences of the sexual revolution point all too clearly to mental and emotional instabilities and a burned-out generation. Having talked with many such relics, I can summarize the consequences. Sin, at first, has an exciting quality. It is a revolt against God, family, and society. It is seen as an affirmation of freedom and as the triumph of autonomous man. However, to war against God is to deny a transcendental meaning to all things. Good and evil, and all meaning, are self-determined and subject to self-ordained change and abandonment. God's meaning having been stripped from all things become quickly meaningless, including freedom and revolt. Boredom and a sense of emptiness are the concomitants of unbelief, and meaninglessness poisons all of life. All that remains is a hatred of life, and of all who love and enjoy life. One result is the proliferation of crimes without cause, or existential crime. Existential crime means the assault or murder of a total stranger, usually, or arson against any object, for no other reason than the resentment of the living dead against the living. In a minor incident, one woman launched into a savage and pornographic verbal attack on another woman, whom she barely knew, because, she said, the other woman's obvious happiness was hateful to her. The object of this attack was a younger woman of very real and active faith. Everything about her was instantly hateful to the attacking woman, whose life was a self-created masterpiece of emptiness and evil. The present era is seeing the escalation of crimes of pure destruction. Those who make a formal religion of their unbelief, the occultists and Satanists, very strongly reveal the devastating consequences of their sin. Let us look again at Dr. Pastor's account of Satanism. A young woman, who at the age of 4 had been given by her mother to a church of Satan, recounts some years later what had occurred. Ritual murder and human sacrifice were practiced, although apparently, at least much of the time, aborted babies were used in these rites in Canada. 4 characteristics of life in this satanic circle stand out. First, the sacred was systematically desecrated in order to make room for evil to take hold. There was a calculated assault on everything good. As a result of this, evil was made to look less evil, indeed, to appear as banal and trite, and hence of no great matter. If virtue is made to be a farce and a joke, then evil becomes a commonplace matter, and nothing to fight about or to feel strongly about at any time. Evil thus has a disguise, the disguise of trivialness. Those who attack the trivial as a momentous matter are made to look ridiculous. Second, the Satanic counsel is, think so much, no time to pray. The master plan is to isolate man from God, and also from man. Prayer is, in part, a cry for help. This kind of cry to God and man is contrary to the plan that every man be his own God. Genesis chapter 3, verse 5. Third, Satan's premise is, I go where everybody's afraid. The people lost in despair, who no longer care about anything, are the readiest recruits for the Church of Satan. Despair means a loss of belief and meaning. It is a denial of Romans chapter 8, verse 28, that God makes all things work together for good to them who love him, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Despair holds rather to the death of the good and of all meaning, or else it says, all good is evil unless it serves me, and all meaning is void unless it becomes my private version of meaning. Fourth, nothing really spontaneous is allowed to happen. This seems paradoxical. Sin sees itself as the radical affirmation of freedom, and yet it becomes the nemesis of all spontaneity. Comte, with his dream of a church of humanity, had a total plan and ritual for man. Marx, in the name of freedom, laid the foundations for a man's total enslavement. Hitler did it in the name of science. Freud denied freedom to man. All human dreams, thoughts, and actions were seen as reflexes and products of the id, the ego, and the superego. The decline or corruption of Christian faith is the decline of freedom also. In the eschatology of sin, man is hated and mistrusted. Man, as he is, however much fallen, is still a product of the great enemy, God. As a result, everything in man's being witnesses to God, even though that witness is eroded by sin. In biblical faith, a man must die in Christ to be born again in him. Satanism, too, has its rituals of death or human sacrifice. In the Church of Satan, Satan declares, We begin by bringing death. The Satanists can kill, but they cannot make alive. Nietzsche called for the death of man and the birth of Superman, the man-made God who would live in a world beyond good and evil, a world beyond God. Neither he nor anyone else could bring Superman to birth, but they did and do unleash hatred and death against God's image-bearer and creature, man. The death of man is the secret goal of humanism in its every form. Its eschatology is an eschatology of death. Wisdom declares from old, "He that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death." Proverbs chapter 8, verse 36. Sin, thus, has an apocalyptic eschatology. The wars of the 20th century, its revolutions, slave labour camps, mass murders, and more are evidences of its will to mass destruction, and the end is not yet. Sin, however, does not govern the universe. The triune God does. As a result, we can say with Asaph, "Surely the wrath of man shall praise thee. The remainder of, that is, all future, wrath shall thou restrain." Psalm 76, verse 10. Sin has no future. Jesus Christ, who is the same yesterday and today and forever, Hebrews chapter 13, verse 8, shall put down and destroy all sin, and finally death itself. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 24 to 26. History shall culminate in the death of sin and the death of death. In Jesus Christ, the old man and the old creation are sentenced to death, but in and through him, the grace of God unto salvation regenerates the elect and recreates the heavens and the earth. The Lord declares, "For, behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered, nor come into mind." Isaiah chapter 65, verse 17.